Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Fix Your Mind on This. It's a muddy contract. Don't get washed away. We're so happy to have you guys joining us today, and we have a wonderful group of panelists that you guys will learn a lot from. You will all be muted throughout the entire webinar. So if you have any questions, make sure to find or put those in the chat located at the bottom of Zoom. We look forward to a great program, and let us know if you have any questions. Kristi, go on ahead, take it away.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kristi Davis, the current chair for forms and contracts at MetroTex, and I have Dr. Blake Bennett with us today. He's going to give us some wealth of information about PIDs, PUDs, MUDs, SUDs, you name it. He is the Associate Professor and Extension Economist Management with the Research Extension Center at Texas A&M. Dr. Bennett, take it away.
Thank you very much, Kristi. Thank you all for having me on. I do appreciate this opportunity to be on and talk to all of you. I've already gotten a comment. Yes, that is Forrest Gump behind me. I believe that Forrest Gump, in my opinion, is the epitome of business and business, the study of business. Everything that Forrest did was because of contacts and relationships. Every benefit in his life was because of someone that he knew and taking a little piece of information from everybody. And so that's really what business is about. It's about relationships. So that's why I highlight Forrest Gump behind me. Today, I was going to talk to you about MUDs, PUDs, and PIDs. And oh my, we can throw in, since Wicked showing down at Dallas at Fair Park, down at Music Hall at Fair Park. I just went this past weekend and saw it again. That oh my is definitely a word to use whenever you talk about these special use districts. Give you a little bit of background before I get into it. I've worked with providing education to the real estate industry for about the last 3 or 4 years, but I've worked in Northeast Texas for the last 20 years with landowners. And the work with the real estate agents is an extension of that, because after all, you are the gatekeepers for people that do own property, and they ultimately find me after they own the property. I just thought that it would be nice to get ahead of the game and make you aware of the work that we do. We do outreach education to the public and work with all landowners. That includes homes, that includes agricultural land, you name it. And I've done some work and done some research with MUDs, PUDs, and PIDs. In fact, I've got a 2-hour CE class for real estate agents on these special use districts. And I've also got some personal experience because my mother moved down here from West Texas and she moved into a MUD. And so I've gotten a lot of practical experience as well as textbook law experience on these districts. One way to start it off, whenever you think of a MUD district, the way that I explained it to my mother is think water. MUDs deal with water. And whenever you think about an area being broken out, new land being broken out into a housing development or such, they have to bring water and sewer to an area. That's part of the job that the developer does ahead of the game. We want streets and we want water and sewer at properties whenever we start buying them. Well, that developer ultimately wants to be reimbursed for the expense of bringing the water, the sewer, and the streets to an area. They have 2 ways that they can do it. They can either upfront charge more for the lot so that expense is paid back whenever you buy the property, or they can allow landowners to pay that out over time. And the way that they do that is they establish a MUD, and they'll get city approval, and then they'll petition the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They're the ones that control MUDs across the state. They will petition the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to establish a MUD. They know exactly how much they've put in terms of money into putting in the sewer, the water, and the streets. And so it's a fixed debt that the property owners within that area have to pay for over time. And so it's assessed based on, similar to what you see with property taxes, there's an assessment that's placed on the property at dollars per hundred. There's a rate, and those property owners pay that debt out over time. And so the way that I sold a MUD to my mother is, instead of paying $67,000 for this lot, you could pay maybe $125,000 and then not have that MUD tax over time. That helped it go down a little bit easier with her. She understood a little bit better. Once that debt is starting to be paid off, more people are moving into the area. The rates that are charged can actually fluctuate. They can actually go down over time because the value of the property within that area is going up. There's a fixed amount of debt. There's a rate that's charged for that, for those assessments. And so as the value of the property in that area go up, then the rates can actually come down. So I told my mother, over time, yes, you may not be paying 50 cents per $100 of value. The board may elect to say, we want to drop it down to 35 cents because we don't have to collect as much to service that debt. At the same time, the rates don't have to go down. That didn't set well with my mother. She doesn't like taxes just like everybody else doesn't. So she said, well, why wouldn't they? And I told her, well, they can choose, the board can choose to spend that money in other areas, such as they can put in parks, they can use it for irrigation, they could use it for something like firefighting. And so my mother said, wait just a minute, I may not want my taxes to go down then. And that shocked me. My mother's somebody that pinches the pennies so tight that Abe Lincoln does not have a beard on any one of her pennies. And I said, why, Mother? Why would you not want your taxes to go down? She said, I'd like for them to build a fire station right outside of my neighborhood. And I said, okay, that's interesting to see someone that is very cost conscious, not really wanting their taxes to go down because they can go for other services. I felt like at that point, my mother understood exactly what a MUD is. It goes to anything water can be provided within that area. Now, there are a lot of MUD districts across the state of Texas. You can go onto the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality on their website and actually find where those MUD districts are. Very, very useful website. You type in an address and then zoom out and you can actually see, yes, this property is in a MUD. No, it is not. Now, there's several ways to find out, is the property in a MUD district? One way is to look on your property tax statement. Oftentimes you'll find it here as long as the MUD is still charging through the county. If they're not charging through the county, then it may not show up on your tax roll. So you may have to look elsewhere. Where exactly are you paying your MUD taxes would be a question that I would ask homeowners if I knew that their property was located in a MUD district. That would be first. The homeowner, the current owner may be the one that knows automatically. But then again, how many of us look at our tax statement and really dissect it and look at each individual taxing district? Probably not a lot of us. You can find that tax notice, as you know, and you can look it up. That does not, if it's not there, it does not necessarily mean that it's not in a tax district. Again, MUDs can contract with outside sources to collect those taxes. So again, we need to go back to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to find out, are they in a district or are they not? I also will caution you that some districts, the debt's completely paid off and they no longer charge at all. You'll find there's a MUD district that actually encompasses Highland Park and Northern Highland Park and University Park. Still an active district. It's been around since 1938, but this district does not charge every single year. The reason, though, that they keep it up to date and keep the paperwork active and keep the district active is, let's say that University Park needs to do some work on the roads down there. They can do the work and then turn that charge on for the MUD. Once they collect the funds that pays for the work that's done, they can turn it back off. So again, go to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to find out, is a certain property in a MUD district or is it not? Looking at PIDs. PIDs stand for a public improvement district. Think of PIDs like a MUD on steroids. Everything a MUD can do, a PID can do, and more. A PID can be used for, say, commercial district promotion. A PID can be used for additional police protection. There are just any number of things that a PID can be used for, the money from a PID that can be used for. And the reason PIDs are so popular is because property owners within a defined area get together and they want additional services from the city. Could be promotion, could be additional street cleaning, it could be police protection, you name it. That PID, once it's established, once the property owners petition the city to provide those services and the city agrees, then the property owners of the area will then be sort of taxed. It's a special assessment on the property, additional monies to pay for those services. We have PIDs that are active down in Dallas, that there's 2 streets down there where the city will actually provide 24/7 police protection. There is a policeman that is on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the property owners actually pay for this additional service through an assessment on their property value. The city of Fort Worth over in the stockyards, they have a PID that's active and it's just on the commercial properties. And that PID provides additional police protection, mounted as well as on foot and patrol. They provide additional street cleaning. They provide district promotion for the stockyards. And that budget's about $120,000, $130,000 a year. Again, it's a special assessment on those property owners in that area. And so the PIDs, again, work similar to a MUD in the fact of it sort of acts like a tax, but it's not a tax. It's a special assessment. And the big difference is that MUDs are ran by a state government entity. They are a subdivision of government. PIDs are not. PIDs work underneath the local government code. And so the individual cities are the ones that manage those. As you know, you're required to provide notice if property is located within a PID or within a MUD. The PID starts September 1st. You're going to be required to give notice. Finding notice on MUDs is relatively easy because it's a state entity. You can go to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, find an individual address, find the MUD that governs that address, and then they provide you with a phone number that you can call and ask for notice. And generally, you'll get that notice via email while you're still on the phone. PIDs are a little bit different. I've tried to help some real estate agents find out, is a specific property located within a PID? That's up, and finding that information is up to how much detail the individual city provides on PIDs. There's no one-stop shop for finding notice. It can be pretty difficult. I can say that. I know, Kristi, I know that you're going to be covering notice in just a little bit. I can tell you, I've been screaming this at the top of my lungs for 2.5 years. Y'all need some additional help. There needs to be a one-stop shop so that you can find out if property is located within a PID. I do know that some of your associations are working on this. They are planning to try and say, We need a one-stop shop, not just for PIDs, but for MUDs, but for HOAs, every single thing, every single district that could apply to an individual address. We need one place where we can go. I would say this is an excellent opportunity for something like Metro Tex, for something like Dallas Association of Realtors or Collin County Association of Realtors. Get in touch with your associations. They are going to be the loudest voice. I do think what they're working on can be very beneficial. I think it's going to come down to funding, but ultimately find the funds. I've been in contact with several legislators saying you need to find the money. This is something that's worthwhile. Somewhere in those coffers, you have to find it because it's going to get pretty sticky. It's going to get pretty sticky from your end. And truthfully, everything that I've seen in terms of notice, it really matters up until the point that you close. Because the law states the way that House Bill, sorry, I took my notes on to make sure I got the House Bill right on my Sonic cup. I know it's House Bill 1543. House Bill 1543 that was passed just last month that makes it effective September the 1st that you have to give notice for PIDs. The same consequence follows PIDs that it does with MUDs. It gives the buyer an opportunity to get out if they're not provided notice before that contract's executed. And so after the contract's executed, everything that I've seen, I'm sorry, you bought property within one of these districts. That's just what happened. I could see an opportunity where a buyer could potentially close on a property, not be given proper notice up front, and eventually try and sue. Now, I don't know how much water that lawsuit would have because every title company that I've seen provides that notice at closing as well. So they are aware whenever they're signing the paperwork, but again, it's one that I believe that the associations need to get together. They really you need to have a one-stop shop so that you can come in and say, is a special use district associated with specific property? Now, in terms of PUDs, those are the easiest ones to deal with up here in Northeast Texas. If you're down around Houston, PUD means something completely different. I can tell you that. But as far as Northeast Texas, whenever we refer to a PUD, it's a way around zoning laws. Traditional zoning, we've got, this is going to be a commercial area. This is going to be residential. This is what can be done within that area per the zoning laws. Zoning laws don't exactly lend themselves to the multi-use districts that we see. Think of Collin Creek Mall that's going to have multi-use. You're going to have residential along with retail. Shops of Legacy is another one. Legacy West. There's going to be multi-use in there. In fact, the old Texas Stadium. Take a second for a moment of silence for the old Cowboy Stadium. It's actually in a PUD. And the reason that they put it in a PUD is because they don't want to change all the zoning laws around. They just want to change what's going to happen within that defined area. And so it's a PUD allows for, we're going to have mixed use in an area that are going to be contrary to what we have in the traditional zoning for this area. It's really not something that you have to notice here in Northeast Texas. It's just a way around those traditional zoning laws. So those are the easiest to talk about, the easiest to cover. Really, it's PIDs and MUDs that we have to deal with up here in Northeast Texas. I know you'll hear SUDs, you'll hear all different types of acronyms. Anything other than a PUD, if you hear SUD, if you hear MUD, if you hear PID, it's going to be a special use district. So those are the ones that we really need to worry about. And Kristi, I'll turn it over to you. If there's any questions, I'm going to stick around, and so I can answer any that you may have.
Fabulous. Dr. Bennett, thank you so much for the information. It certainly gives a little bit of clarity to what we're talking about, PIDs, PUDs, MUDs, because they are confusing. And those of us, our members that are working all throughout the Metroplex here, but certainly those on the northern end or these new subdivision areas, these new development areas, we are certainly facing these questions and this information that really needs to be given and allowed to have a better understanding. So one of the ways, one of the questions that was asked in regards to how do I know as a member of Metrotex, how do I know where to get better information and learn more about this? Well, I'm going to tell you, I've got 3 amazing instructors with Metrotex here on the call with us, the webinar with us this afternoon. It is Cindy Baas, it is Marion Napoleon, and Lori Solecki, who are going to continue to provide some answers, and I'm going to pose some questions to them. And Dr. Bennett, if you feel like you've got an expertise, please come on in and join us in some of the abilities to answer these questions that we're posing. But we have a 1 to 4 boot camp, contract boot camp class that I would highly encourage you to go out. That's a great way to get more information and understand best practices of the contracts, where you would go look for information about MUDs and PIDs and PUDs, and also, again, best practices, the do's and don'ts of our contracts to keep you out of legal hot water. That's certainly what we want to do. So I've got 3 of the best with us this afternoon and going to pose a few questions here. So with all of the new construction, and we certainly find that a lot of MUDs and PIDs are in our new construction. Ladies, and I'll let whoever wants to answer this question first. When you're representing that buyer, what are the best questions to ask when dealing with new construction? Cindy, I saw Lori, go ahead.
I'll answer that. So I think that one thing that you want to do is when you visit with builders, you always want to ask them, are there any special assessments that we need to know about? Is there anything that this potential owner is going to have to pay, and what are those things? We're okay with that. We just need to know it ahead of time. The key thing is disclosure, I think, in any situation like that. So I think you just ask, as he said, is there a MUD district? Is there a PID that you have that we're going to have to pay? What is the, what all do you have going on out here that we're going to be expected to pay? And how are you going to disclose that?
Absolutely. And that'll go back to, I overlooked the fact that I was going to mention the form that is drafted. It's been approved by TREC for the notice to pay improvement district. And it is TREC form 53-0, TREC form 53-0. And that's where you're going to give from your seller to notify a buyer that they are in a public improvement district. It's pretty I don't want to say confusing. It's just got a lot of blanks that you and your seller are going to have to know the answers to be able to fill that out. So that will go to this next question. And I know that you've already put in the chat for MUDs, where you would go find that information. And Dr. Bennett certainly addressed the fact that PIDs are a little harder to find. But ladies, who might be best to answer? Where would you help educate and counsel with your seller when you are having to give notice and utilize this form about PIDs? Where are you going to go find that information?
One of the first places that I go to look is the tax records, obviously, because a lot of times now, I know Dr. Bennett said not all of them go through the taxing entities. So we will need to dive a little deeper. And, Google's our best friend these days. And so sometimes if you just go on and Google the city or subdivision, a lot of times you will find that those public improvement districts do come up. Kristi, while I'm still talking, there's another taxing entity out there that I came across up in the northern Denton County area, and it's called a tax increment reinvestment zone. So another taxing entity that's out there That one is through the, actually, you can find some information with the Texas Comptroller. So I'm going to put that link into the chat and you guys can check that out, because I had a client that did that, and it was the taxing ramification on that was almost just as much as the property taxes. And so when we were going through that, that will last a good 25 years before that, debt is relieved. Now, hopefully, as more homeowners come into that new subdivision, that amount for each homeowner will, diminish a little bit, but that's where I look for them.
Perfect. Lori, Marion, any of you have suggestions or counsel education to your sellers when you're going to have to fill out this new form?
Marion, you're muted.
You mean you can read lips? Of course, that kind of rolls into that next question, Lori, about when is the best time to talk to that seller. It's so important that you address all of this information up front prior to listing the property, and having these difficult conversations, so that gives you, the realtor, time to help them do the research and all of those things, so that now that information can be uploaded and provided to the masses. So I think don't be too anxious to put the property on the market until you know for sure, and until you know whether you're in a PUD, a PID, a SUD, a HOA, all of those things. But do that research up front and have it available to the masses.
And if I can share something, I'll share my screen here. I put the information in the chat box, but I have got, can everybody see this website that I've put up? It's Texas Commission on Environmental Quality.
Oh.
Okay. This is the website that you can go to. Again, the website address is in the chat box, but click on this Water Districts Map Viewer, and it will load the state of Texas. You can, of course, zoom in on Northeast Texas, and everywhere there's a red box is a different MUD. There is a button up, or an area up here, you can type in an individual address and it will take you right to that address, similar to what Google Maps would. Once you find, let's say that you find an address in here that is inside a MUD, if you click on anywhere inside that red box, you get a pop-up that will tell you what the MUD information is, the district information. Click on that link and it will pull up a page that gives you the most important information, which is the telephone number of that MUD district. Call that number, tell them you're a real estate agent, say, I am representing a property, I'm selling a property within your district, I need notice. And they can email you notice directly from the district. So to me, that's what makes MUD so unique and in a lot better in terms of finding notice. It is a government entity. It's directly in there. It's monitored by Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and you can get notice directly with the phone number there. So to me, yes, absolutely, the tax notice is a great one, but it does not give you the phone number of the MUD. You're still going to have to find out, who do I call to get notice? This is one. I can tell you another. Someone asked about how do title companies get information on all these districts. They have curative departments that is their sole focus, is finding that information. So, contacting your title company and saying, look, I'm going to be listing a property, and can we start curative work on this? I'm going to try and push to get it to your office. Can we start the groundwork and finding out, is this property located within a special use district that I need to give notice on? Again, that notice has to be given in fact, on the new rules on PIDs, the potential buyers have to sign that notice, and then it is filed whenever you submit that contract, and so that would be a great start. That just be part of your listing is you get in touch with and you find all the information about these districts ahead of time.
Definitely. Dr. Bennett, amazing information. And please make sure you go check out that source, because I hear too often, that I don't know where to get that MUD disclosure. I don't know how to get it. Does the title company do it? I don't have to do it. The title company always does it. So those types of things, make sure you're taking on your due diligence as a listing agent or as a buyer's agent to get that information to your client so they can make the best decision for themselves, and you're staying in compliance of what our laws are and our rules are. One of the things that I thought I might just quickly look at is the new PID notice, is that yes, it is going into effect September 1. And I'm going to see if I can share my screen in case people have not seen this form. And I'm hoping that this will share it. Can everybody see the form now? So this is our draft form. It's showing still draft because it doesn't have the quote full approval just yet. But that is what this form Trek 53-0 looks like. So as you see, there's lots of blanks in there that you have to learn how to fill out along with your client. So this is really, really important information on where to find it, where to go look for it, and also making sure that you are not taking all of the liability on for this, that you are going to the proper places and putting the onus back onto your seller client and you providing them good information to inform them as to what's going on. So I just wanted to share that form with you as well.
Kristi, but before you pull that back, can I make a comment on that?
Let me go back and share it again.
Yes, share that one again, because the second blank that was on there, notice that insert subchapter A, chapter 372, local government code, or chapter 387, local government code as applicable. PIDs are going to be governed by one of those two. And so you have to find out which one is this specific PID governed under. And that can be difficult to find. I can attest to that. I've tried to find on some of them, and it does take a lot of digging. Contact your title companies, find out if they know. I can say that there's talk about potentially housing everything at one site, and I know that the preference would be Trek keeps track of all notices. You can type in an address and it has everything for you, all the notices ready to go for that specific area. That to me would be ideal. Right now, we don't have that. So yes, we've got to do a lot of digging, a lot of looking.
Definitely. But some of the penalties, if this is not provided, is buyers may terminate the contract at any time up to closing. Buyers may file a lawsuit for damages after closing. Damages may require a seller to return all costs related to the purchase of the property back to a buyer, with the buyer recovering the property back, with the buyer reconveying the property back to the seller. If a copy of the notice is executed at closing, buyer may not sue for damages. These penalties are similar to current penalties applicable to the failure to provide the MUD disclosure notice as well. So they're very similar in that regard. So again, we want to provide notice either at time of, it's an attachment, the addendum right here that you are executing on the contract, or prior. Great thing to have into your documents when you're listing in MLS. And then also making sure that at closing that the title company is also having one signed there as well, just to eliminate gray matter. We all like to do that. These three ladies are teaching courses to help you eliminate gray matter in working with your buyers and sellers. And this is how you do it. So any other questions? Do we have any other great questions that we haven't answered in our chat? And then Lori, you've got one, or you want to add something?
I do. I want to ask Dr. Bennett. So would this be a good rule of thumb for us as practitioners when we are talking to sellers to simply ask, are you on city water or city sewer? If they say no, then chances are you probably are going to be under a water district or something unique unless you have septic and well. Would that be a possibility to do that?
You can do that, but I can tell you there's always an exception. And this is one that, little story here. I was giving my MUD spiel in one MUD district. There's a district that's up in Sherman, Denison, that also encompasses Whitesboro, that encompasses Gainesville, Munster, down to Sanger. And that district actually sells water directly to the city, and then the city provides water to the citizens. So I had a lawyer that contacted me from Sherman and said, we do not have to provide notice because the city's the one providing notice. Yes, they're in a district, but the city's the one that's providing it. So I went to the water code and I highlighted a word "and" in the water code. And I said, because of this word "and," I believe that you do. Well, the lawyer came back and pointed out the word "or" later in the paragraph. And I said, okay, I'm an economist, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm arguing about the word "and" and the word "or" with a lawyer. I don't know, I'm at my limit. So I called Trek and I said, what do we do in this situation? Trek said, we have to go back and we have to look at the intent whenever the law was passed. We're going to have to do some digging ourselves. And I said, okay, here is practical knowledge, which I know sometimes is contrary to what legal knowledge is. But my answer is that you're in a MUD that at any point in time, the city could say, we don't want to handle this way anymore. We want you to handle it, MUD district, and we're not going to charge anymore. You can start charging. For that reason, I would provide notice that says, yes, you're in a MUD district, but the district's not charging. It's going through the city. Then that way you've provided. Trek seemed to like that idea because they said you can never over provide notice, you can always under provide. So just because you're getting a city water bill does not necessarily mean that you're not in a MUD. And I come back to the active MUD for University Park. At any point in time, if roads need to be maintained down there, they flip the switch, turn on the MUD tax long enough to pay for the improvements and then turn them back off. So that district, absolutely, notice needs to be provided that at any point in time, you could have a tax. So in my opinion, I think just going to do you have city water or not, may not, that probably doesn't cover that base, in my opinion. And
thank you for that.
the lawsuit's the one that really, Kristi, that you were mentioning, the lawsuit's the big one that would really worry me. I'm sure that title companies are going to cover that base very, very well. That's their bread and butter. They don't want lawsuits. I know that they're going to cover that base as well as they can. And to me, the notice really, it's one that buyers don't have that out. And as we know in this market, this current market, we see buyers that are putting 2 or 3 bids in on a home and hoping they get one. Sometimes they've gotten 2 or 3, and so they're looking for an out. Don't let notice, not providing notice of a PID or a MUD, be one of those outs that they can take. Since we're on water, I'll throw in one more tidbit. My wife actually manages the title company branch, and she had a buyer that was in that situation where there's 2 or 3 bids that we got accepted. We need to get out of a few of them. The buyer themselves went through the law and they found an out. We all know that you have to disclose if a home is in a 100-year floodplain. That one, no problem. We already know that. We know to check that box. It's actually in the law that you have to provide notice if a property's in a 500-year floodplain. I see some, Patty, I see you shaking your head. Yeah, you know that. That was one that caught everyone off guard because there isn't a lot of property in DFW that's not in a 500-year floodplain. So that's, again, buyers looking for ways out, close that loop so that they can't get out because of notice on MUDs and PIDs.
So, thank you. We've got one question I want to ask in our chat here. So, it's from Shelley, and she says she sells a lot of lake properties down at Cedar Creek Lake. With MUD and use of notice to prospective buyer, even though there are no taxes charged. Is this new form replacing that form, or is this new form for the use of PIDs only? So Lori, Cindy, or Marion, please, one of you take that question.
The new form is just for PIDs.
Just for PIDs. Yeah,
yes, it's just for PIDs. And also I see what form is for a 500-year floodplain. I believe that that's on your notice to buyers. There's a checkbox there. Check with your broker because, Kristi, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that that's already there. We just didn't know to check it.
Right.
So going back to the question for Shelley, and Lori reminded us of this for us who teach Legal 1 and 2, but in Legal 1, it gives us a notice for the buyers on the MUDs. Yep. So that one is still there. That one is still good to utilize.
Absolutely. And then another one is the MUD notice in addition to the PID notice. Yes, you might have two. You might have to give notice of a MUD and you may have to give notice for the PID. This is the new form that is specifically for use for public improvement districts, the PIDs. All right, let's move on briefly. One other question that I was asked here are any of these district fees covered under HOAs?
And that's a great question. And a lot of times they are, it just depends on the HOA, but a lot of times they are not. They're in addition to HOAs. In our research today, we were discussing that with the PIDs, MUDs, a lot of times they will go in and do special improvement districts instead of HOAs, because we learned that with the PIDs, that is a tax write-off where HOA fees are not. And so that was quite interesting that we found out. And Dr. Bennett may know more about that as well.
Absolutely. And then back again to new construction, because, you know, this form is fantastic and we as licensees are going to be required to adhere to this, although it is voluntary, this use one. It is not it is not mandated. So there could be a different form to give notice for a PID, but obviously the majority of the notices are going to come from this TREC 53-0. But new construction does not need to use this form. So ladies, how are you going to educate, or how through the 1 to 4 boot camp, or when we're talking new construction, how is it best to give that advice and ensure that your clients are being given notice that it is in a PID when we're purchasing new construction with our clients?
You're muted, Marion.
Try to make sure I'm not making noise. One of the biggest things I think with new construction is asking for a copy of the contract upfront, to just read through what's in the contract for the different subdivisions or whatever you have, and then going back and asking about some of these special improvement districts and what's required and all of those, because like a traditional sale, it can completely throw an income to debt ratio completely out of the water with a lot of these different assessments. So new construction, the only difference is that you don't have a form. It's all controlled by the builder. But as the realtor, it's our job to still ask for that information upfront so that we can now make sure that it gets back to the lender. Then they can look and make sure that that buyer can still qualify, because it can really throw things out of whack.
Absolutely. One other question, and ladies, maybe you have heard if we think that this will follow into our seller's disclosure. Do you think we'll add some additional language into the seller's disclosure, whether that be the Texas Association of Realtors or even our own MetroTech seller's disclosure form in regards to PIDs?
I think that would be a great suggestion to have that changed.
Yep.
You know, since we're having to deal with that up front. I think that would be a really good opportunity for Texas Realtors or even Trek to look at.
Well, and as current chair of Forms and Contracts, and Kathy Faulkner is on the webinar as well today. So she and I will kind of do a little powwow and see if that's something to bring back to the Forms and Contracts Committee in regards to getting that added on to our MetroTech seller's disclosure. Sound like a plan, Kathy?
Hey, Kristi, I noticed there's a question from Lisa regarding the form that I think Dr. Bennett had talked about, where we check the 500-year floodplain, and it is on our sellers, just on the Texas Realtor Sellers Disclosure, Lisa, on that. Under, I pulled it up, sorry. Can't get over to it, but it's on it where it talks about asking the sellers to check mark if it is in, and one of the questions is that it's located wholly or partially in the 500-year floodplain. And so a lot of times our sellers truly are not looking to see if that is, you know, applicable to them. They're just going, oh no, it's not in a floodplain. Oh no, it's not in any floodplain. So we need to be careful when they're checking that. We need to help them with that. So it is on our seller's disclosure if you're using the Texas Realtors one.
Perfect. And then one more question regarding Trek has updated the residential sales contracts, including the 1 to 4 family residential contract, the unimproved property contract, for the statutory requirements in regards to PIDs. So the draft form of 53-1 is still in draft form. Zip forms and other contract vendor providers may not have those forms updated just yet. They are in the process of updating them, but you can find them out on the Trek website as well as Texas Realtors website. And hopefully that answered that question. If anybody else sees any comments or questions in the chat, let me know.
Kristi, I do have a comment here. And you mentioned something about builders and about, you know, notice there, and that they don't have to give the standard notice that's coming up that you showed earlier. Absolutely true. I also have seen some builders come in and as an incentive for one of the months say, we're paying off your PID. And that's great, because some PIDs can be extremely expensive. I mean, yes, we know about Panther Creek. It's about $3,000 for that one, for the assessment, and you have 20 years to pay it off. Some assessments can get up $25,000, $35,000, so that it's an additional $2,000 per year. And I've seen contracts cancel because of the PID is just too much and we didn't know about it ahead of time. If my recommendation, because I ran into this with my mother, the promotion that was going on whenever she built her house is you get a free sunroom and free wood floors. Well, we all know how that works. Yes, they're going to be given a free sunroom and free wood floors, but whenever my mother went to the design center, they were charging her for her wood floors, and she questioned that. Well, don't worry, we've taken it off the price of the home. I would want to know, if I were a buyer, and if the builder was paying off my PIDs as an incentive, are you actually paying the PID off, or are you taking it off the price of the home? Because I want to know, do I have to come up with that additional $2,000 or even $200 per year. That would make a difference, as you said, in whether or not they can qualify for the loan. That would make a huge difference. Is that PID actually paid off, or have you just reduced the price of the home by 25, 35,000, whatever it is for that PID?
Absolutely. And it looks like we may be frozen, but I'm not certain with that. We can certainly, hopefully everyone can still hear everyone if we have frozen on the screen. We've got about 10 minutes left of our webinar, and I want to switch gears just a little bit with the revised contracts in regards to our fixed lease. And I want to open this up in regards to talking a little bit about solar panels. And there have been some challenges in the past. Hopefully it is getting better with the revised contracts and the addendum for fixed leases. But Marion, would you like to give just a little bit of information about solar panels, maybe what some best practices when you're going out on that listing appointment and talking with your sellers?
Sure. So first of all, if you Google a property on Google Earth and you see solar panels, or if you approach a property and it has solar panels, I want you to run. No, I'm just kidding. As fast as you can. No, I'm just kidding. But here's some things that I do want you to understand about solar panels. Okay, first of all, the February storm has created a lot of major issues for a lot of homeowners who have solar panels. So we have to really, really be careful, one, to make sure that there's not already damage. But one of the greatest things, I want you to kind of take a couple of things down. The very first thing, a lot of sellers with these solar panels, they don't have a clue what they signed. They don't have a clue how much they owe, a lot of those things. So just like when we talked about all the PIDs and PUDs and different things, we need to dig deep first into getting that information from them. Ask them, the one lady said, I don't know. I told them I didn't want the solar panels on. And I'm like, well, how did they get on the roof to put them on? She goes, I don't know. I just came home one day and they were there. And I'm like, well, I'm sure they sent you a bill. And so she went and got the bill. And I said, well, let's call. Okay. So call and at minimum look for a payoff, because not all of these solar panels companies have put a lien on the property. And you don't want to wait until after you get your title work back to find out that there's a lien against the property. So assume that if there's solar panels, there's some type of feel assessed with it, unless they paid it off. But again, they can pull that for you. Now, if for some reason there are solar panels on the property, there's a couple of different options you have. The very first one is the seller can pay off the lien. That sounds pretty easy, right? Unless they don't have the money to pay it off. They don't have enough equity within their, monies to pay it off. So that could be a problem. They can remove them. However, the companies are saying it can take months and months for that to be done. So in lieu of that, they give them the opportunity to move the panels to wherever the homeowners are moving. Okay. Which may sound great, but then there's potential damage to the roof. Okay. So when it comes to those solar panels, now also they said that they are inheritable, all of those things. So they can inherit them. But again, one of the things we want to make sure that you take heed to when it comes to the solar panels is get all of that information up front from the homeowners as much as you can. What they may not be able to find, again, if there's a lien on it, the title companies should be able to find it if it's not a private little small mom and pop entity. Okay. But again, that's not always the case. They save a lot of money potentially on their electricity, but in the end, it could cost them to sell their property. So we need to do everything in our power to make sure that we collect everything up front. And then the biggest question you want to ask yourself as an agent is, do I really want to list this property with so many gaps, so many holes, so many unknowns? Okay, so back to you, Kristi.
All right. So when you also say that, what happens if the buyer, we talked a little bit about it, but Can you talk a little bit more about the fixture lease addendum and how that addresses some of the components in regards to buyer doesn't want them? How do we go about going through that process and utilizing that and helping educate our membership in regards to that form?
Okay, so if the buyer does not want them, again, you have the ability to reach out to the solar panel, or the owners have the ability to reach out to the panel companies and ask them to remove them. But that may take a long period of time. And most of the time, it's not going to happen until after closing. So it addresses some of those things, but the bigger issue is just the damages that it may cause to the roof. That's the biggest unknown. Okay, but you just put the addendum up here where it talks about that there's solar panels and all of the rights buyers shall assume and sellers shall assign to the buyer the fixtures and the leases. So that one is pretty obvious. It says buyer has received copies of all of those different things. So the biggest thing is they can keep them, and that's the easier way to take care of it if the solar panels are affordable, I guess, so to speak, to both the seller to pay off. Okay, or if the buyer assumes the lease, can the buyer qualify with the new additional fees that is assessed on them as a result of the solar panel? So it's so many different layers that you really need to address. Now, what this form is good for is it's really good to kind of sit down and talk with that seller about a lot of those things up front, because if there is a monthly amount that is going to be assessed, then you want to make sure that all buyers that are looking at that property are aware of that so that they can determine if they can afford it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen on that one. And Lori, I think you had a comment. You put something in the chat, but if you want to go ahead and make sure you're unmuted and go ahead and share with us.
Oh, I just saw that there was a question about liability for us basically getting the information. And I just wanted to reiterate, Marion had made a really good point the other day, saying that she sits with the seller and says, call them. I am here with you. Call them and you talk to them, put us on speaker, and let's try to get this taken care of. That way it puts the liability back on the seller, and it's not, well, I called the company and they said, because now the liability's on you. So always do that with your seller. So I just wanted to share that. That was a good point she made.
Definitely great advice too. Remember, we don't want to take on unnecessary liability, but we need to help and guide our clients to do the due diligence to make sure that we're providing the best information and allowing each individual client to make the wisest decision for themselves through the process. We've got 2 minutes. If either anyone sees anything in the chat that we didn't answer or any big questions, or I'm going to let Dr. Bennett give us a little bit of a final word, and then the 3 ladies, if you would like to provide one final word, and we will wrap this up shortly. Dr. Bennett? Uh-oh, did we lose him? Dr. Bennett, you're on mute.
Sorry, it wasn't allowing me to unmute there for a second. I guess everyone was tired of listening to me. You know, I've tried to find notice. I can help anybody find notice on MUDs. If you've got a property, give me a call. I can help you find the phone number. We can get you notice in no time. I'll get you the phone number if nothing else, and you can call them and they'll get it to you. Finding information on PIDs is very, very difficult. I've tried it. I've helped. And at some points, it's just gotten to a point where we've said, you got to catch this person at the desk at this city, and they're going to be the ones that's going to answer your question. Not everybody at the cities knows what PIDs are. So it's getting in touch with that right person at the right time to find out information. It's something that I've been, again, yelling about and at the top of my lungs for over 2 years. Something needs to be done. I believe it's the associations that can get it done. You have the loudest voice there. Something needs to be in place to help you find notice, because you're being required to now. Get through this time of something's on the horizon. It's coming down the pipe. I just know it's going to help you out. In the meantime, get to know those people at the cities, because each individual is different. Each individual city is different, and PIDs are popping up like crazy. Yes, I believe they're going to be in our future. I think they're going to be more popular in our future. So it is coming.
And get out on the MetroTex website and look for that 1 to 4 contract boot camp class. It's a great way for you to dig in a little bit deeper to the contract, the do's and don'ts, the best practices, and learn a little bit more about making sure you have what you need. This was an amazing panel. Thank you, Cindy, Lori, Marion, and Dr. Bennett. We so appreciate you being here with us today. This was recorded and it will be sent out for membership. It'll be on the YouTube channel at some point in time shortly, and you can re-watch it and get great information and the resources that are available to you. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and thanks for being a member at MetroTex.